Karen Kramer is going to be giving some closing remarks. Karen is a curator at the Peabody Essex Museum. She is the organizer of the exhibition Native Fashion Now. Karen, come on up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian and to Kathleen Ash-Milby and Elizabeth Kennedy Gish for this invitation, and also to our co-hosts, the Fashion Institute of Technology. They've worked tirelessly to make this a success and to engender rich and honest dialogue. It's an honor to share space with our distinguished colleagues and panelists, and I also want to thank you all for coming and participating. So the goal of my brief talk is to just provide some closing remarks. And I just want to remind us that the goal of today's event was to unpack the complexities surrounding the appropriation of Native fashion in conjunction with the Native Fashion Now exhibition specifically, and with the Native American art and culture writ large. And indeed, appropriation is one of the most fertile possible starting points for having discussions about power, profit, oppression, and the importance of representation. And in the process of curating Native Fashion Now, it was a real struggle to figure out how to deal with this large, knotty topic of appropriation. On the one hand, I just wanted it to be a celebration of the boundless Native creativity, Native identity and culture seen through the lens of contemporary Native fashion, but you can't get away from it. You cannot talk about contemporary Native fashion without also talking about appropriation to some degree, just like you can't talk about settler colonialism without also talking about racism, as Adrienne aptly pointed out. I knew that this exhibition needed to turn people's expectations around regarding what Native fashion is, in part because of those images that Adrienne shared on her Google search. So I knew that I needed to turn people's expectations around, and I knew that I needed to have this exhibition have the Native artists define for themselves what Native fashion is, and at the same time honor the incredible output of the Native designers working today. So I'm just going to try to sum up a few of the threads that I think ran through today's conversations. I am going to pose some questions that are still open and also go over some possible solutions. So one of the threads that we talked about a lot was this, were power dynamics. How to negotiate these cultural borders that are shifting, but also how to do that in relation to gross exploitation and commercialization. In the 17th and 18th centuries, we saw that the dynamics were, there were different power dynamics at play. There were non-natives in native territory, still are, but the dynamic was a little bit different. And Native people were power brokers, and I think that also underscores what Kathleen Ash-Milby brought up when she was talking about that there's a real different, there's a disconnect here because there is a Western way of looking at land and ownership, and that extends to patterns and stories and symbols that we see play out in fashion and appropriation of fashion today. Not everything is for taking, and so these different worldviews have conflicted and clashed from the very beginning. But we also see a thread of change throughout the day. Native communities are living, breathing, dynamic entities, and the art created by Native artists from these communities reflect change and evolution in the form of new ideas, materials, and technologies. Native art and design and Native culture is always changing. It's always contemporary. There is no room for this essentialized fantasy of the mystical, mythical, unchanging indigenous person. And another thread is commerce. Jessica asked us, who benefits by the selling of culture that's not theirs? Consumers and makers need to educate themselves. So some open questions. Lynette's question, Let's look at creative license. What's sort of teasing apart creative license from the abuse of power? Who gets to decide? It is not always that one person, even within a Native community, will agree, but we have to ask these questions and we have to start looking at these power dynamics. How do we all, sorry, now I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, my next open question. How do we all do the hard and sometimes uncomfortable work of taking these conversations out of this room, beyond these walls, and into the street? How do we do that? How do we talk to Daniel Cole's friend who was wearing that T-shirt with the headdress on it, or his friend, another friend who is wearing the headdress? Or, as Joe Horscrafter suggests, do we put energies into shining the light on Native art and culture only and put our energies into that? Or can't we do both? Can we try to do both? And also, how do we move forward when there aren't always black and white rules to follow? But we also talked about some solutions today. Many solutions that were offered by our speakers. So let's keep these in mind as we move forward. Accountability was one. Let's be fluent and try to understand that we need to be accountable to our Native communities and our integrity. And even though there aren't always black and white answers, there sometimes are, and that education is key. Education, doing the research and doing the reaching out. Do not leave the Native voice out. You can't, and don't be a Euro hob. Collaboration is another solution that was put forward, so do that carefully. And another solution was about financial support. And so you want to buy Native, as Jessica was underscoring, and I firmly believe, buy Native, but also rethink your role as a consumer and as a maker. And remember Susan's 3 S's: the significance, the source, and similarity. And so I think these are some tools that we can put in our toolbox and take with us as we go and leave these walls. And I want to thank you all so much for your participation and support. And it's been a great day, so thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. I think this has been a really stimulating day. It's given us a lot to think about. We have a reception upstairs in the rotunda. We would love for you to join us. And the galleries will remain open for the reception if you haven't seen the exhibition Native Fashion Now. Thank you.